had left the Democratic Party as an assistant U.S. attorney because I was investigating a lot of corruption in city government under John Lindsay. And even though John Lindsay was a Republican who turned Democrat, all the people in city government were Democrats, and all these great society programs, which I kind of thought sounded nice, it looked like none of it was getting to the poor people.
The Rubin Report, and I'm Dave Rubin. Friendly reminder, everybody, to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that notification bell so you're alerted when new videos come out. And joining me today is the former mayor of New York City and a special guest star of one of the best ever episodes of Seinfeld, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you very much, Dave.
So I could basically I could spend an hour talking to you about Seinfeld and stuff you did on Saturday Night Live, but I suspect there are probably some more pressing things that you want to get to. But I thought what would be interesting, instead of just going into all of the stuff of today, sure, which we will get to, is that, especially for my younger audience on YouTube, that sort of know you as New York City's mayor and 9/11, that version of you, you had a whole life and a political evolution before that in many ways is sort of like my political evolution. Mm-hmm. You fought off the mafia as Attorney General and a whole bunch of stuff. So can we just do sort of Rudy Giuliani 101? I mean, really from childhood on, sure, and then we'll get to the topics of the day.
I'll do it real quick. I was born in Brooklyn, second generation Italian American. I went to Catholic grammar school. Then I moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, which was quite common in those days, and continued in Catholic grammar school.
What town in Long Island were you in?
Yeah, in Garden City and North Belmore, Long Island, two different places in Long Island. Yeah. But I went to high school in Brooklyn, Bishop Laughlin High School, which was a special diocesan school, in part because I wanted to be a priest in my early days. And kind of gave that up when I found out there were things called girls. And kind of didn't work with the priesthood. Then I went to college in the Bronx in Riverdale, Manhattan College, law school at NYU, graduated law school, and became a law clerk to a really fine federal judge, Lloyd McMahon, who taught me how to be a trial lawyer. And then I entered the U.S. Attorney's Office at a very young age. And because of his training, I sort of started off as already a pretty experienced trial lawyer, because he was a nice enough man to kind of teach you what you have to do in the courtroom. And I love being a trial lawyer. I spent about 5.5 years doing that, tried 100 cases or so, some mafia cases, bank robbery cases, white collar cases, income tax evasion, customs fraud, just about everything you can think of that are federal crimes. And then I was the head of the narcotics division, which in those days was focused a lot on the French connection, the Italian French heroin trade, the Colombian trade, all the Colombian cartel people. That was the first time that somebody put out a contract to kill me. Vito Genovese's brother-in-law threatened to have me killed because I prosecuted him and he got convicted. The Colombian cartel threatened to slit my throat. But I was like 25, 26 years old, and you feel immortal at a young age. Then I went off to Washington to be the deputy chief of staff to the Deputy Attorney General, Harold Tyler, in the Ford administration. And that's where I started to think about, I had left the Democratic Party as an assistant U.S. attorney because I was investigating a lot of corruption in city government under John Lindsay. And even though John Lindsay was a Republican who turned Democrat, all the people in city government were Democrats, and all these great society programs, which I kind of thought sounded nice, it looked like none of it was getting to the poor people. It was all in the hands of the administrator of the program, his wife, some of the crooked minority politicians in the city, who I quickly came to realize didn't really care about their community, just cared about getting rich for themselves. Very disillusioned, I changed my registration from Democrat to Independent. Then I went off and I worked for 2 years in the Ford administration, met a lot of Republicans, and found out that they really weren't terrible. My impression from New York were, Republicans only care about rich people and they're really very mean. And turned out they were just as caring about poor people. They just had a different way of trying to move them out of poverty. Kind of made more sense to me that you move people out of poverty through work than welfare. I kind of had always a strong, aggressive foreign policy with regard to the Soviets. So I was sort of a Kennedy Democrat. In those days, there was a fellow named Stu Jackson, a senator, who was a very hardliner on foreign policy. So then I switched to being a Republican. I said, well, let me try the Republican Party. Went into law practice, worked for Ronald Reagan's election, and Ronald Reagan made me the third-ranking official in the Justice Department. I did that. I came back to New York. I became the U.S. attorney. I prosecuted the 5 families of the mafia, over 800 mafia people, a large number of Wall Street criminals, Boesky probably being the most famous one, Milken, prosecuted 3 or 4 sitting congressmen, and also started using the racketeering statute in a way that it hadn't been used before to break up organized crime. We took over the Teamsters Union, drove out organized crime. We took over the casinos in Las Vegas and got rid of them. We took over the Fulton Fish Market, the whole industry of the garment industry and entertainment industry. Strangely, the mafia controlled the gay bars in New York. And a combination of our work and then the advent of HIV/AIDS got rid of those places. But the mafia owned those bars for purposes of extortion. They owned every single one. You couldn't open a gay bar in New York and not have Vito Genovese and his number 2 guy walk in on you and tell you that he owned half the bar. You'd say, why? And they'd say, because if we don't, we'll break your kneecap. So we got them out of there. And I had and then I guess the thing that made me famous as the mayor was I prosecuted a number of the high-level officials in the Koch administration, his chief political allies, and proved that they were involved in a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme to collect fines and divert them to their own pocketbooks to the tune of about $15 or $20 million a year.
Jeez.
That gave me a great deal of name recognition, and I got the crazy idea of running for mayor. All my friends told me I was nuts. A Republican couldn't win. I thought maybe I was nuts, but I was young enough to try to be nuts and find out if I would enjoy politics. I was lucky enough to get David Garth as my political advisor. I started off 27 points behind. I lost by 2. David taught me how to be a political candidate, and it was the best showing a Republican had made in 40 years since LaGuardia. I got 48% of the vote. And I guess if I had gotten 20, I'd have given up. But with 48% of the vote, I said to myself, maybe I can have another chance to do this.
And then you eventually decided to do it again, and the rest is history.
4 years later, I did it again, and I won by a very narrow margin, about 3%. And then I ran for re-election 4 years later, and I won by a landslide. And I was very fortunate. I made a lot of promises. I really went into the job with the notion that this is the first Republican in 2 generations. I might be the last Republican mayor of New York. Why not just do everything I wanted to do? And if it worked, I'd be a hero. And if it didn't, they'd throw me out. And maybe 20 years later, they'd realize I was trying to do the right thing. I really had that attitude. So I cut city government. I cut city government to what it should be. By about 20%. I laid off enormous numbers of people. I decreased everything in city government, interestingly, but the police department, because I had a couple of years right before I was mayor, we had 2,200 murders. And we had about 1.1 million people on welfare. We had 10.5% unemployment. And we had a deficit that was said to be about 700 million. It really was 1.4 billion. And we had a situation where 75% of the people in the city wanted to leave. So I ran on very much the thing that Donald Trump used 4 years ago, which I might say I kind of suggested he used. I said you can't do any worse. How can New York City be any worse than leading the country in crime, murder, violent crime, white-collar crime, organized crime, drugs? We were ahead in everything.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.